I am Bea Murphy. I am the resident realtor on the presentation. We have David, who is our real estate law expert, and Rick, who is from MBA Mortgage, and he is the loan guru. So you got the three brain powers over here. And I work for Lamakia, and Rick works for MBA Mortgage, and David's at Bentley. Next slide. Oh, sorry. There's all our lovely headshots. All right. So first question is, am I ready to buy? Yeah, so it's a whole bunch of things. Are you financially ready to own a home? These are kind of questions that you want to start asking yourselves. What do you need for a down payment? Will I be pre-approved? Do you want to buy alone or with someone? Could be a friend, could be a co-signer, could be a parent that helps you. Again, all these like starting decisions and questions you gotta start going through in your mind. What area do you want to buy in? As a realtor, I have a lot of people who come to me and they kind of don't know, but I tell them to keep their net cast a little larger and kind of have a larger net, get pre-approved, and honestly, those two things will kind of direct which way you want to be because sometimes you want to buy in a certain area, but you might not be pre-approved for that town's price points. So have a wider net, that way it gives you more options. And what is the timeline in buying a home? It is never too early to start, in my opinion. And normally from offer accepted to closing is usually about 60 days. Next slide. I'm going to kick it back or actually over to Rick. And this is his slide. He knows Mr. Number Man, Mr. Loan, because this is way past my pay grade.
Yeah, so I'm just going to cover it. It's a lot of information here, but just going to go over it very briefly. Everyone's going to be getting the recording as well. So if you want to kind of go back and take a more in-depth look at it, you can. But it's just basically going over the difference between buying a home and renting and showing the value in purchasing. So just a couple quick things to point out. At the very top, you can see it has kind of what your mortgage payment is and what your rents are expected to be. So it just kind of shows how rent in year one is less than your current mortgage payment. But as time goes on, that rent continues to increase and your mortgage payment is going to stay pretty much the same. So eventually rent ends up being more expensive than your mortgage payment is. And then the other big thing is just at the bottom, the net gain by buying a home, $350. So that's taking into account appreciation on the home as well, because you have to keep in mind that when you purchase a home, it's an investment. You're getting all that appreciation as home prices continue to go up versus renting where you don't get that and you're just continuing paying rent. So although the rent and mortgage costs end up being about the same in this example over 9 years, by buying a home, you get that extra $350,000 of appreciation that you don't get with rent. Next slide. There we go.
All right. Oh, nope. Yep, good, very good. Where to begin? So a lot of people kind of like chicken and the egg situation. What do you want to do first? Do you want to find the realtor or do you want to get pre-approved? And the answer, in my opinion, should be doing both at the same time. Only because we can't, realtors and lenders work hand in hand. And having both processes started helps overall. Because if you get pre-approved, then you have to find a realtor. Doing both is just kind of like the best, getting the ducks in a row. So one, when you meet with the realtor, they'll talk about timeline, what you want versus needs. I always tell my clients, what are your non-negotiables? What do you need to have in the home versus a nice to have? Because nice to have may not be in your budget. Figuring out an ideal price range. But again, that's where having that partnership with a lender comes in hand because again, I might think I might be approved for 500K when I'm actually pre-approved for a different amount. And I honestly don't prefer clients to see homes without the pre-approval because I say it's going shopping without a wallet. You're going to end up falling in love with something and you won't be ready to move. And given where you are in the market, you might need to move fast. And then discuss the financials. The realtor and the lender, once you get the pre-approval, again, will work hand in hand. And working with the lender, you set the budget and get the pre-approval. And then Rick can actually speak to the difference between a pre-qual and a pre-approval, which is very important to note in the process. If Rick, you want to kind of touch base on the differences between both.
Yeah, so for pre-qualifications and pre-approvals, they kind of all get lumped in as the same thing, but each place can have a very different pre-qualification versus pre-approval. So you want to make sure when you're going through it that they're not just taking basically what you put into their system as the correct numbers, because it all depends how different things are figured out. And I'm going to get into it in a few slides too, like different, like your base income can be treated differently than commission income can, or just like putting in your debt payments. Well, a car that you own is treated differently than a car that you lease. So if you just kind of put in numbers and get something off of that, it's not going to be accurate versus actually going through the process and having your credit looked at properly and having all of your documents collected and making sure that you get like a very strong pre-approval versus just something that's based on the information that you put in that isn't going to be really accurate.
Perfect. All right, so here is the overall process. Oopsies, sorry, 1 second. I did something to my screen. Okay. From offer accepted, remember offer accepted to closing is usually about 60 days. So one is starting your home search. I've had clients who look for 2 weeks and we find a place, and I've had clients for literally 5-6 years. So one is figuring out your home search. Then we go start seeing homes, open houses, you put in that offer. After the offer gets accepted, usually between 7 to 10 days, the first contingency, if it's in the offer, is the home inspection. And then I won't go into too many details. Usually once the home inspection is scheduled and happens, we get past it. Again, there's a lot of little things that can happen in between, but this is a high level view. I loop in a real estate attorney who then once we're past the home inspection, can start working on the purchase and sale. Personally as me, as a realtor, I don't work on the purchase and sale. I have that the real estate attorneys do it because again, it's a legal document. I did not go to law school. And purchase and sale usually happens 2 weeks after the offer accepted. Now, to go back a little bit, when you place the offer, you usually put some kind of, they call it an earnest money deposit. 99% of the time, it's usually $1,000, and that only goes to the listing broker if it's accepted. And purchase and sale is the next big deposit during the process until closing. Once we're past purchase and sale, I kind of tell all my clients, all right, this is like good to go, especially if they have a strong lender with a pre-approval, not a pre-qual, where I'm not concerned. Everyone starts packing, start moving, start going. And then it kind of gets a little dark on the realtor side and kind of moves towards the lender portion because they start doing underwriting, getting documents from you, whatever they need. And then usually about a week before closing, obtain a mortgage commitment. This is saying, all right, we're good to go. We may have like a couple of conditions we need to meet, and then a final clear close and a final walkthrough of the property, usually the night before or the morning of closing, and then closing itself. So there's a lot of things that happen in between, but again, having good partners will help you walk through that part. Next. All right, so we're gonna do a high level example of this couple, Chris and Alba. They met, they want to buy a home. Next slide. Just move this, I can't see. All right. Chris and Alba need a pre-approval. I'm gonna let Rick do this one because this is not.
Yep. So first step of getting a pre-approval, there are pretty much 3 main factors in a pre-approval. So credit, assets, and what's considered your debt to income ratio. So with credit, big thing with credit is not just your score, but kind of everything that makes your credit what it is. So obviously, someone with a 730 credit score, you're going to be seeing a better interest rate than a 580 credit score. Might qualify for different programs, different down payments required for it, but also not just the score, but what makes up the score. So is there any prior bankruptcy or foreclosure? If there is, how long ago was that? Any late payments, what the late payments are, how long ago was that? Any charge-offs, collections. So people always think it's, well, this is my score is what it is. And that certainly is a factor, but also everything that makes up that score what it is also a factor in it. Assets is really for your down payment, your closing costs. In some programs or property types, you might need reserves as well. So making sure you have enough money for that. And then also seeing, is it a checking account, savings account? Is it a retirement account? Are you getting a gift? Which a lot of people always get concerned about gifts and think they're going to be extremely complicated. They're not. They're really simple. So if you have a gift, it's really not an issue. But just figuring out exactly where that money is and how that money is going to be spent. And then your debt to income ratio. So debt to income ratio is all of your debt. So whatever you're going to be paying for the property you're looking at, your principal and interest, your taxes, your insurance on it. If you're looking for a place that has HOA fee included in that, and then all your other debt. So car payments, credit card payments, student loans, child support, can be really anything that's any sort of monthly debt that you have, divided by your income. Debt and income can be determined a variety of ways in it too. So I was given an example of like a car you own versus a car you lease. That can be treated differently. Income of base salary, what type of base salary it is. Are you a stable 40 hours a week? Do your hours vary? For commission base or bonuses, self-employment income is treated differently. So important to talk to someone and figure out not just how much you make each year, but how that number is actually going to qualify for it. So those three are the three main factors. They all factor into different program types, and different program types will have different requirements for credit assets and your debt to income. So big ones are conventional and FHA are the two most popular. VA for veterans, also a very good option. And then there's something that's kind of called the non-QM space, which is anything that's like a little more unusual stuff, like loans that you don't need to show documented income on would fall into there. Some like special self-employment programs or investment programs would fall into there too. But the two main ones we see are conventional and FHA. Generally, conventional is a little bit higher credit. And then FHA is generally for people that need a little bit more help, but really either one can be a good option for you. Just kind of depends on what your personal situation is. And then for documents needed, again, varies a little bit based on program, but generally what you're going to be seeing is W-2s, tax returns, pay stubs, bank statements, and some form of ID. So like a driver's license, passport, seen birth certificates, social security cards, something like that. So when you're getting ready to submit an application, get approval, make sure you get those documents in place. Just be ready for it, and then we'll let you know what you need. Right, next slide. So in this situation, so Chris and Alba, they're purchasing the home together. So Chris's sales manager has $80,000 of base income and $40,000 of bonus income. It's important to specify that that's two separate things and not just $120,000, because base and bonus are treated differently. And then Alba has just base, $65,000, and again the assets. So savings, $39,000, a gift from parents, which again very easy to use, and then also retirement income, which can be used. So you can kind of see here they have a variety of different income types, asset types. All of them can be used, but it's important to make sure you specify. And when you're working with someone, make sure you specify what those are and get all the information on them, because they are calculated differently and treated differently during the process. All right, next slide. So, for here, we're looking at credit and liabilities. So combined credit card debt of $400 a month, Alba's student loan debt of $800 a month, and then the car loan debt of $625. So I only mentioned the monthly one and not the balance, because the balance isn't as important to us. It can be if we need to pay something off, which sometimes happens. But really, when you're looking at how your debt to income ratio is calculated, you're not using the total balance. You're just using the monthly payment for it. And then they both have credit score 708. It's a good score, 708. Anything in the 700s, you're going to have a really wide selection of options. which is also an important part of making sure that your credit is good. But also with that, as I mentioned earlier, 708 is great, but you do have to dig into what is making that score 708 and see if there's anything there that could cause an issue. Next slide. So after looking at everything for Chris and Alba, a standard conventional loan made the most sense for them. Again, it will depend on your situation and what program works for you, but in this case, standard conventional loan. So looking at the yellow combined option, because they're purchasing together, monthly income of $15,416 combined. For a conventional loan, it is going to depend lender to lender, and situations could differ as well. But generally for us, 50% is our debt to income ratio for a conventional loan. So take their income, divide it by 2, and you get 7,708. Take those monthly liabilities. So the car payment and the credit cards and the student loan debt was 1,825. And then you just take their debt to income ratio 7,708 minus the 1,825, and then you get 5,883, which is how much they're pre-approved for as their monthly payment. Also, something I always like to say too is that's what they're pre-approved for as their monthly payment, but it might not be what they're comfortable paying. So important to always talk about not just how much you're able to be pre-approved for, but what are you going to actually have as your payment and what you're comfortable paying. Because they might say, I'm approved for 5,883, but only comfortable paying 4,000 a month or something like that. So make sure with whoever you're using, go over that and right away say, okay, I'm looking for what I'm pre-approved for, but I would like to keep my payment at 4,000 a month or 5,000 a month. So they know, and they can make sure to put everything together to get you to the amount that you want to spend. Next slide.
All right, Chris and Alba need a realtor. Number one priority, your best interest. So you want to find someone, maybe it's because I've been always involved in sports, but someone has like a same team mentality, someone that is going to make sure you get the best deal. The contingencies are in your best interest. Literally from beginning to end, you feel that they're on your side. They're not pushing you into properties. They're not it's like a vibe. It's hard to explain, but someone that you know will have your best interest at heart. A professional who will guide you through the multi-step home buying process, because it can be daunting. So you want someone that can, be there to answer questions, walk you through what's next, what's coming up. Because there's a lot of moving pieces, especially in the beginning 2 weeks on the realtor side of what's happening. A resource for trusted partners in the home buying process. So lenders, attorneys, home inspectors, insurance, movers, general contractors. I've been a realtor for 6 years. Over time, you learn who's good, who's not good, and making sure that your realtor is recommending people that will have the same mindset for your best interests at hand. Provide property data and market value comparison. So sometimes I'll have buyer clients who want to make sure the price that they're putting in makes sense. So I can pull comps, pull data, pull solds, which depending on the market has some value, but then there's also multiple offers where that data kind of goes out the window. But negotiate best price and terms in your favor of the client. So knowing the market, knowing what pricing you can do. So I actually had a client today who sent me a property. It was the first day on market. Do you think we can get below under asking? And my response was no, not the first day on market. You want it to sit for a little bit and then you have negotiation room for the pricing. So again, figuring out the best price and strategy. And there's different ways when you make an offer to be competitive without going to your max. And then monitor dates of contracts for deliverables. So when is a home inspection due? Because if you surpass that home inspection date, you can't go backwards and do a home inspection. If you get past P&S, your deposits could be liable. The mortgage commitment, if we don't hit mortgage commitment, the offer deposit and that purchase and sale deposit could be at risk. So being on top of the dates is a big part of it because it's your money. Next slide. All right, they found a home and want to make an offer. Yay! All right, how will they make their offer? Offer considerations in terms of the offer. So offer considerations. How competitive is the current market? This is where that trusted realtor comes in play and should be very in tune with the market. Is it a spring market? Is it a fall market? Where are rates? Where are we in the market right now? Because it does change pretty often. How many days has the home been on the market? I mentioned this earlier. So brand new home on market, price well, she's pretty, open house is slammed. That's going to be a different offer strategy than property's been sitting for 20 days and still available. Um, are there any other offers? So again, if that brand new home on the market and they have multiple offers, that offer strategy is going to be different than that home that's been sitting on for 20 days. What did the comparable sales tell us? So, where does this home fall price wise? If it's been sitting for 20 days, I can guarantee you they priced it too high, or there's something wrong that we're not seeing in the pictures because they probably didn't put it in the pictures for a reason. And then when you find the property, my first phone call to the listing agent is, what's the driving important things for the sellers? When do they want to close? What do they want to see in the offer essentially? And also, are they buying? So in this market, I found a lot of subject sale on seller finding suitable housing. So we want to make sure those dates either match or whatever they want. Maybe they want use and occupancy, but again, talking to the list agent and seeing what do the sellers want. And then the terms of the offer. There's the home inspection. So this is your chance to, again, with your realtor, find a home inspector who will go through the property top to bottom. They are not a contractor, so they can't tell you exactly how much something is going to cost to repair, but they can tell you, this water main line is leaking. Contact a whatever plumber, whatever. Appraisal contingency. So whatever price the property lands on, your lender will then hire a third party appraiser to go to the property and make sure they match. If they don't match, then there's room for negotiation, but a contingency in the offer, especially if it's going wildly over asking. Mortgage loan contingency, make sure you obtain the mortgage. There's escalation clauses, hold on, lease back, which appliances are included. Something I've learned to always include in the offer is, per MLS, all the appliances listed out and make sure my client knows if there's anything excluded, like washer or dryer is a big one. I always make sure if it's included or not, because again, that's just another, $3 to $5 grand my client's going to have to pay if they don't have them there. And then earnest money with the offer. Normally it's about $1,000 with the offer deposit. And then the purchase and sale deposit kind of depends on how much you're putting down. So it can be up to 5% of the purchase price for both. So 5% purchase price minus 1,000 would be your P&S deposit. Or if you're an FHA loan and you're only putting down, say, 3 or 3.5, then that's your total chunk of money that's going. So you're not bringing additional money to closing. Okay, next slide. Okay, so when we make the offer, I put it all together in one lovely PDF to the listing agent versus 1,000 documents. So first is the contract to purchase. So that is your offer price, $600K with all little details. Then it'll be the earnest money for usually $1,000, can be a little higher. I also include the pre-approval letter from Rick, the mass disclosure form. So this is a required form by Massachusetts, which just states my relationship as a realtor. So it says I'm not an attorney, I'm not an appraiser, I'm just a realtor. And then lead paint, if applicable, whatever that word. Any home built in Massachusetts 1978 or prior needs a lead paint form. Again, this just usually, honestly, 99% of the time says seller has no knowledge of lead-based paint in the property. And then it's just basically disclosing that seller doesn't know. Yep. Okay, next. Offer accepted. Now what? So we will hire a home inspector. This is a different company. And the big things to note, I've often heard, what if the home doesn't pass home inspection? It's not a pass or fail. They will just go through and make a laundry list of things that need to be maybe fixed or wrong or broken. And a lot of the home inspectors I have usually rate it as like a green, yellow, or red. So obviously green's fine, yellow is like, and then red's kind of like a safety issue. The main purpose of a home inspection is to make sure there's nothing majorly wrong or anything beyond your scope of comfort. So me, for example, my husband's in construction. Our comfort level is a little higher versus someone who may not have someone handy or knowledgeable in that field. So, it usually takes 2 or 3 hours. You go to the property, they check literally everything. And depending on what comes up, there's 3 ways to handle the home inspection. You can ask for a price reduction. Seller repairs certain items. So say an outlet is not grounded, you can ask the seller to hire an electrician and fix that, or closing cost credit. As a realtor, I usually suggest closing cost credit, or depending what the math works out for the price reduction. So sometimes the price reduction may not make as much of an impact if as like versus closing cost credit, because you could use that money planned for the repairs. If a seller makes a repair, I mean, there's nothing to hold them back from hiring the cheapest contractor to go in and make that repair and say, yes, I did the repair. So I'd rather have my client have money, hire someone they know, like, and trust to make the repair. But again, those are 3 options you can do. They need an attorney. All right, this is where David comes in.
Thank you very much, Steve. And I am going to modify something B said just a little bit, just to touch on it. Do you need an attorney when you sign the offer? That depends. And what it depends on is something that B said earlier. And it depends on, are there very specific things that you want in this deal? Now, B is somebody who's going to ask you those kinds of questions, but God forbid you go to somebody who doesn't ask those kinds of questions and you're not really sure where my want items are going to appear. A rule that you need to understand is everything that is listed in the offer is automatically included in the purchase and sales agreement. So if you say, I absolutely positively want this thing, this is a make or break thing for me, that needs to go into the offer. Don't wait for it to maybe get put into the purchase and sales agreement. Maybe I can negotiate to get it put in, maybe I can't. But I will tell you, 99% of sellers will not take that offer to their lawyer until it's signed. So if it's in the offer in the beginning, that makes it a lot easier, and it makes it a done deal that it is in what's going on. You also have to balance what you're asking for with what you're trying to get. And B is going to help you with that, because you don't want to make the offer unattractive either. So there's a balance going on there, which is why I would suggest that it's not a horrible idea to have your lawyer already picked out, know who it is, and just run it by them. And if they're an experienced real estate attorney, and notice I said real estate attorney, I've been doing this work for now 40 years. I've represented buyers, sellers, banks, mortgage companies. I mean, I've done all of that. That is my specialty. It doesn't mean that other lawyers, criminal lawyers, etc., weren't schooled sort of in that area way back when. But what it does mean is that they're not current. They don't understand the industry. That's something that I do. That's something that my colleagues in this who do this for a living, that's what we do understand. As the slide indicates, do I need to go to a big law firm downtown Boston? No. Why? Because I've met downtown Boston lawyers who are great and some who are crappy. I've met lawyers in Waltham who are good and bad. You need to meet them. You need to understand, can you work with them? Is there a dialogue? Do I feel comfortable? For me, I give my clients my cell phone and I say, look, call me whenever you need me. Just call me, send me a text. I will answer whatever the question is. No question is a stupid question. Sometimes, and again, I really want to stress this, which is why having a lawyer is important. It doesn't matter that your uncle has bought and sold 5 properties without a lawyer. Your uncle is not a lawyer, okay? The fact that he hasn't been burned or gotten into trouble yet doesn't validate that methodology. You want someone who knows what the law is. You do not get your legal work from your hairdresser. You do not get your legal work from your cousin who, watches Judge Judy all the time. You go to someone like me who does, so that I can educate you on what the law says and what the law doesn't say. So that's what's kind of important to have happen. Next slide, if you could. In terms of the purchase and sales agreement, what is that? That document is a more comprehensive document than the offer. There's actually a court case that says you don't need a purchase and sales agreement. It's not required under Massachusetts law. Do we have one generally? Yes, 99.99% of the time we actually do. In that document, it's going to say some basic things. The basic form or standard form, as you sometimes hear used, is 4 pages. My purchase and sales agreement is, at this point, 12. Why the extra pages? Well, because after 40 years, every time my bum almost gets shot off because somebody misunderstood something or something wrong happened, I created a paragraph to make it more clear. If I am doing my job, it will appear that I'm doing nothing. Because what will happen is everything is going smoothly. All the dates are spaced out in a nice way. From Bea's perspective, we're checking title, we're making sure everything that has to happen is getting done, and I'm staying in contact with you. You call me, you ask me questions, I'm going to help you with that. As to the dates in the agreement, Bea touched on a few of them. Sometimes the P&S is done before, sometimes it's done after, rather the home inspection. That depends. The norm is that the inspection will be done prior to the purchase and sales agreement. How fast a time from offer signing to P&S? Around 10 days. Can it be shorter? Yes, it can. It depends, and I say it depends for this reason. If the home inspection date is Friday and you expect the P&S to be signed on Saturday, you're now requiring all the negotiation to happen on the weekend. Now, I know that Bea works on the weekend, but that's a little bit ridiculous to say to her, well, you and the lawyer all have to do everything over the week. That doesn't make any sense. Nobody's doing that. It doesn't mean we haven't. It means you shouldn't expect that. What you should do is, you want to make so that there's 2-3 business days in there to people work out what's going on. Plus, as Bea mentioned, say there's going to be a credit, closing cost credit. She may need a day or two to get in touch with the listing agent, give that to the seller. And similarly, people need time to think about this. Do I want to do it? Do I not want to do it? So that then the lawyers can put into the agreement the things that you want. Ultimately, I want to make sure that that document has all your wants and desires in it, reasonable expectations. And I say the word reasonable because if you want a new house, then buy a new house, okay? You can't take a 50-year-old house and say, well, I want the whole roof repaired, I want a brand new kitchen, and I want a brand new bathroom, and I don't want any increase in price. If you say that to me, I'm going to say, that's a wonderful thing. Do you have a genie in a bottle somewhere? Because that's not happening. So the way I do business, and I've worked with Bea in the past, and I know the way she does business. Yeah, Bea wouldn't do this because she's nice. I'm not. If you're acting like an idiot, I'm going to say, you know what? You're acting like an idiot. No one is going to agree to that. I'm going to tell you the truth because that's my job. That's the way I do things. All right. In terms of when is your mortgage date or what's called your commitment date, a commitment date is a promise from the lender to do something. What is that? To lend you money. Now, you have to understand the following, and I'm going to use an odd example in this, because sometimes people get loan commitments, and I'm not saying Rick would do this, but they issue a commitment and they say, congratulations, we've agreed to lend you the money, provided we verify your employment, provided we check your credit rating, provided we get a gift letter, provided we do these things. And there's 15 provisos that allow them to get out of lending you the money. That is not a commitment. That's like asking a woman to marry you, and she says, well, yes, I'll marry you, provided Jim doesn't ask me, Bill doesn't ask me, Marty doesn't ask me, and you have a job that earns over $200,000 a year. That's not a loan commitment, which is why when I write the document, I say it's an unconditional loan commitment where all the things have been done. We've promised to lend you the money. If it is a minor issue, like we just need to verify that you're working, as long as you're still working, that's going to happen. I'm not worried about that. That we need to get a gift letter from your mother or your whatever. Again, provided you have a mother that's alive and can write said letter, I'm not worried about that. So again, that's the reason to have me or someone else that knows what to put in here. The other thing I will say about dates, and I'm sure that Rick does not do this, but in my 40 years, I've noticed the following. If your commitment date is the end of, within the next 2-3 weeks, well, many of you may know that it's Thanksgiving. Around Thanksgiving, people take the week off or half the week off. What's going to happen is that commitment date is going to have to be pushed. Why? Well, because half the staff that Rick works with are not there. So think about those dates and think about, is there a holiday in there that may disrupt workflow? If that's the case, you might want to keep that date a little pushed out. I traditionally, when my clients ask me, if the loan consultant says I can get it done in 4 weeks, that's generally a reasonable period of time. If the loan consultant says I can get it done in 10 days, that'll be interesting. Okay. I don't want to say that loan consultant is lying. I'm just saying that's a very optimistic loan consultant going on there. Okay. And the reason is because sometimes things get delayed. If it's an FHA loan, the federal government may have to approve it. If we have to get your taxes, and again, it's in and around April, that might be an issue. So it's always easier to make your dates farther out, and then we advance them, as opposed to agreeing to something and now suddenly we can't meet those dates. It just elevates things, makes it a lot harder to do. Once I draft the purchase and sales agreement, so the negotiation is going to happen between myself, seller's counsel, seller's attorney sends me an agreement. I am going to take that agreement and make it a fair and reasonable agreement. What does that mean? I'm a person that doesn't like doing the following. Some lawyers, I shouldn't say to raise their bill, but it does cause their bill to go up. Here's what seller wants, here's what buyer wants. My agreement is right in the middle. Why? Because I've represented both buyers and sellers. I know what they'll both agree to. So I don't spend hours going like this. I mean, that's a lovely thing. It'll buy my wife a lovely dress or coat, or we can take a vacation or whatever it is. But internally, I don't like that. I'm going to go to a fair and reasonable position at the outset. What that does is it makes the transaction smoother, it makes it fairer, and I know the agreement is going to be agreeable. After that's accomplished, I'm going to send it to you and I'm going to give you homework. I'm going to say, I want you to read this thing. And you're going to read it and you're going to go, I don't know what the hell it says. That's okay, because now we're going to have a conversation either on the phone or in Zoom or in person. And I'm going to go through every single paragraph and I'm going to tell you what it means. I'm going to translate the words into words that you understand. And I'm going to force you to ask questions. So there'll be a test at the end. So I want to make sure that you understand what you're signing, what your obligations are. Once that happens, that agreement is going to get signed. He's probably going to do it using DocuSign or other digital modalities. And then it's ultimately going to go to Rick. And so next slide, and I believe that is now Rick.
Yep. So this is kind of the general process that we have here at MBA. Again, it's going to vary a little bit place to place. Everyone kind of has their own little thing, but this is the general process that you're going to see really anywhere. So using Chris and Alba's situation, so they applied, collected their documents ahead of time. Again, as Bea was mentioning earlier, very important that you're not just saying what you have and someone is giving you a pre-approval off of that or pre-qualification off of that. Actually looking at your documents. So we have those. Person's been pre-approved, offer's been accepted. So now the offer's accepted, we register the loan, which is basically submitting the loan, and then disclosures are given out to you. So that is disclosing exactly what your loan is going to look at or look like. So it will have your interest payment on there, the terms of the loan, any sort of requirements on there, what your monthly payment is, which again should have already been discussed, but it's going to be on there for the exact amount. And then from that point to the approval part is kind of like what Dave was mentioning with the commitment date. So loans been disclosed and submitted, and now the underwriting team or underwriter will look at everything, look through your documents. The appraisal will be done to see how the property appraises. Does it appraise over the amount we need to, under the amount we needed to? And how does that look? Title will be looked at, which David will handle, and see how that looks. And then eventually, once all of the conditions on it are cleared, then you'll meet the commitment date, get it clear to close, and the loan will be approved, and then head to closing. So next slide. And now, congratulations, they've been approved.
All right, I'll pop back in for this one. So in one of the first slides, I mentioned the final walkthrough is done before closing. I've had clients who said, my closing's Friday, I have Monday off from work. Can we do the final walkthrough then? My answer is no. And it's not just me being mean, there's a reason. So once you sign those documents, you own that home. And then once it gets recorded, technically. So say you do the final walkthrough on Monday. It is January. It is frigid cold. You do that walkthrough Monday. Everything's beautiful. It's lovely. But then the pipes freeze. You don't see that home again until Friday. So in between Monday to Friday, your pipes froze and your home is a disaster. So once you sign those documents and it's recorded, you own that disaster. So I try to do the final walkthrough as close to closing as we can. So the night before or the morning of closing. And I've had a lot of people like, oh, I have to work that day. You're buying a home, take a half day, do the right thing. It's not, you don't buy a home every day, right? So tell your boss it's okay. You can take a half day. Once you do the walkthrough, we make sure the home is in the condition you expect it to be. So people have rugs, people have large pieces of furniture. Once they move all of that stuff, making sure there's no holes, there's no, the flooring is the same underneath the rug. That actually happened to us at a property. The seller had a kitchen rug in the kitchen, and under the rug, the tile was a different tile. So we didn't care because we were ripping it up. But again, if we did, that would have been a big issue. Make sure that everything that was in the offer still is at the property. So is the washer and dryer included? Are they still there? All the appliances. If you agreed to leave some stuff, it's still there. So making sure it's how you want it to be. Make sure, so again, back to the home inspection. If the seller agreed to make a repair, I print that repair addendum and I bring it with me to final walkthrough, and I make sure everything is done to my client's satisfactory needs. So if a window was broken, make sure it's fixed. What else is there? There's one more, I think. Make sure there's no issues from movers, water damage. Literally just making sure the home is in the right condition that you want to move into and expect it to be in. And say the home is not, or the seller left stuff, that's a big one. The seller has to take everything with them, regardless if that pile of tires in the back has been sitting there for 20 years, they have to move that. Just because they didn't have it moved doesn't mean they're not supposed to. So everything needs to be out of the property. So say seller left the tires in the backyard. If they don't agree to take it, I'll negotiate what we call a holdback with the attorneys. So say we're gonna hold $1,000 from their proceeds until those tires are moved. And if they're not moved within agreed upon date, we keep that $1,000 to do, hire someone to move them or whatever. So making sure you do the final walkthrough is very important to do. It's closing time. This one goes back to David.
So this is now where I get involved again. Just one thing that Bea said, and again, she says them much more politely than I would. When you do that walkthrough, you have to understand that that house is now going to be vacant. It's going to be empty. You're going to see some minor scratches here and there that you didn't see before. Why? Because there was furniture in it before. You could have seen that if you lifted up the rug or whatever. I tell my clients this: I don't want to hear from you unless there's a hole in the wall. If there's a door off or something catastrophic, okay. But you have to understand that the house is going to have some wear and tear that you just didn't see. So understand that walking in will make your expectation of what to find better. And Bea is absolutely right. We call it room clean condition. What that means is you can clean it with a broom. That tires in the backyard, I cannot clean with a broom. Okay, bags of trash, I cannot clean it with a broom. That's the seller's obligation to get that crap out of there. Now, in terms of the closing itself, the date and time of the closing will be set in the purchase and sales agreement. I applauded and I loved Bea's comment that take the day off. For goodness sakes, it's one of the most important things in your life you're going to be doing other than getting married or having children. So, you know what? Take a half a day off. Now, generally, the date of the closing is firm. The time gets adjusted as to when the lawyer's free, I get my paperwork, when everyone is free. I arrange my closings around my buyer. Okay, so if my buyer says, Dave, I know you told me to take the day off, but I can't. The only time I can close is at 6 a.m. in our apartment in Winchester. Well, guess what? I'm going to be at your apartment in Winchester at 6 a.m. Okay, and we're going to close. And then I'll figure it out as to what I'm going to do with the sellers. The procedure is this: you will get a final figure from me as to how much money has to be delivered to me in order to close. I get that final figure from Rick's closing department. They are going to tell me generally the day before how much that is. Now, a little known fact about Massachusetts law, you'll notice on the middle plate there that it says bank check or wire transfer. Today, under Massachusetts law, you have to use a wire transfer. A bank check is no longer acceptable. It actually hasn't been acceptable for 10 years. Why? Well, because it's actually not considered good funds, because a bank check takes a day to clear. That is not immediate funds. And there actually was a case where the person got a bank check on Friday, dumped it in their conveyancing account. The bank went bankrupt over the weekend, and now that check bounced, which is why we all use, for the most part, and some don't, I do, bank wire transfers. They're as easy as a bank check. The only time a wire will be difficult, the only time, is if you're getting the money out of Schwab or Fidelity or something like that. There might be a delay. So you might have to take the money, move it from your Schwab account into your BOA account or Citizens or whatever it is, and then wire it out to me. I will give you wiring instructions. It's very easy to follow. And then what happens is that money is in my account, ready to be used on the day of closing. Please do not calculate that number on your own, okay? You may get close. I need it to be dead on. Why? Because the bank, the lending company, is going to ask me for proof that you delivered to me that exact amount of money to the penny. So I need to calculate that out, get it verified by Rick's people, and then tell you. Once that's done, we're now going to do the closing. I'm going to go through all of the pieces of paper. There are different types of way we can close. Some banks, lending institutions, it's all paper. Some, part of it's digital, part of it's hard or wet, as we call it. I will explain all of it to you. Once it gets signed, I check your driver's license, etc. We're then going to go to record. So kind of the order is, in the best possible world, both sides are there. They all sign the paperwork, they leave, I process it, I then deliver it down to the Registry of Deeds, either electronically or manually, depending on if it's recorded or registered land. And then I call everybody, I notify Bea, I notify Rick that congratulations, you own a home, okay? Now, the best time to close is earlier in the morning. Why? The reason is, especially if it's the end of the month, the registry could be very busy, and you don't actually own the home until it gets recorded at the Registry of Deeds. After the closing is all done, we're on record. I process all the paperwork. I will send you a secure PDF of everything that you sign, so you'll have everything right there with you. Bea will probably give you some gift or something to say congratulations, or a hearty handshake, depending. And now you're the true owner of the home. But it's got to get on record for me to do that. So we like to get that done as early as possible. And as it said, once it's recorded, I wire out the funds to the seller. A lot of times sellers don't come today. When I represent sellers, I usually go to the closings for them. And so the sellers just sign stuff ahead of time. You will have the bulk of the documents to sign, so that you know 95% of those forms are federally regulated forms. There are forms that everybody signs. There's just a lot of them, okay? You can read them if you want. If you would like to read them all, we'll need 4 hours, so that you can sit there and read all 99 pages and ask me questions. Normally, a closing takes between half hour, 45 minutes, depending on how many questions you got for me. If we've gone over most of it already, a half hour and you're done. I am more than happy to write a note to your employer to say the closing took 5 hours, and unfortunately, that's why you couldn't come back to work. So that's a joke, by the way. Okie doke, next slide.
All right. So tips for no homeowners. These are quick tips. You want to make sure you maintain your smoke and carbon whatever monoxide detectors. Set aside money for maintenance. Being a homeowner means things are going to pop up. So just because you close the property doesn't mean it's going to be perfect forever. Once tax season rolls around, you can write off your mortgage interest. Hold on, I'm just going to move a little thingy over here. Real estate, this is a good one. Real estate taxes are mailed to you, but they are paid with your monthly mortgage. So when I bought my first condo, I was so confused because I got this in the mail and I was like, oh crap, I have to pay an extra whatever grand. And I get calls from my clients all the time because even if we tell them, we'll forget. It's all included. Just keep the records when you file your taxes. And then homeowners insurance is also included with your monthly payment. So don't get that mixed up. Again, they'll probably send you paperwork. Just keep the paperwork for your records. Next slide. And I think that is it. All right. So I believe we can try to get through a bunch of questions and we got emailed a couple of them. So I will go since I'm talking first and get to the questions that I got. So it was advice for a first-time home buyer on getting started, first steps / what to look out for. Getting started is just getting started. Honestly, there's no harm and there's no obligation to start looking, going to open houses, connecting with a realtor, start seeing what you like, what you don't like, what your non-negotiables are. It's better to do this sooner than later because then when you finally figure out this is what I want, I don't want a double yellow road, I don't want this or that. It's never too soon to start and to start saving as well. And what to look out for. Again, I think going to open houses is probably the best practice because again, there's no obligation. Just when you sign in, put someone's name in because they'll call you unless you want calls from the listing agent. It's just good practice to have. Again, I would say, again, I've had clients who started looking a month ago and some who've been looking for years. So when you start to have that feeling, I don't want to pay someone else's rent or someone else's mortgage, then I think it's time to start looking. That's a question. What constitutes a good deal on purchasing a home? This one's a tough one. If you're ultimately happy with it. It is a big financial purchase, one of the biggest in your life. So a good deal is you like honestly being content with it because say there's 14 offers and you won, but you paid grossly over it, but it's your dream home. So that's a good deal because it's your dream home. It's everything you want it to be. Or it could be vice versa. It's you got an under asking price, but that just means the listing agent may have inflated the price. So there's no true answer on a good deal. At the end of the day, it's just making sure you're happy with that purchase and it makes sense for your life. Should I invest in my first property for profit, rent to others, or for personal? I live at my parents' house right now. So something I did that I love that I did. When I was 26, I bought my first condo. I lived in it for a few years. So I lived in my first property and then life changes and we bought a single family home and I rented out said condo. And then I watched the rates and I refinanced when the rates dipped to a 15-year mortgage. And then I used that property. So in a couple of years, that mortgage will be paid off. So to answer the question, I would start, you need to buy a McMansion at first. Buy something within your means, buy a condo that could be used for future renting. So if you don't want to live with mom, dad, whatever, start to make a plan to buy something. Again, I think it doesn't need to be ginormous spend. Something that you can rent later is always a good buy, in my opinion. Those are the 3 questions I got.
All right, so I'll go next. I just want to touch on that last one too. Always consider multifamilies too. And people think that you need a massive down payment to buy a multifamily. If it's an investment property, then down payment's higher, but you can get into a multi as a primary residence and your down payment can be very reasonable. So keep that in mind. And also you can use the other units as qualifying income for yourself as well. So that can sometimes help. It's one of those weird situations where sometimes someone might struggle qualifying for a single family, but actually can qualify for a multifamily. So always keep that in mind. And then the 3 that I had were, do you expect 30-year mortgage rates to decline in the next 2 to 3 years? And if so, where do you think they will settle pre-COVID levels? Wish I could know for sure. I think everyone does. But from what I've been seeing and what I've been hearing, going to see rates stay pretty much where they are until probably mid next year, then start to see a slight decline. I would not prepare to see 2% rates or 3% rates next year at all, for anyone thinking that. But over the next few years, probably see a slow decline back into the normal like 4% range that we saw most of the time pre-COVID. So I'd say prepared to have rates be somewhat similar to now, maybe a little bit lower over the next few years, and then eventually settle back into that 4-ish range. But I wouldn't be prepared for 2 and 3% like you were seeing a couple of years ago. Other question is, how should you budget for closing costs when buying a home? Online, it gives a range of 3% to 6%, which can be a wide range. And it's a wide range for a reason, because it can vary significantly. The best way to budget is to talk to someone and figure out your situation and what costs you're going to be looking at, because it really does vary a lot. What state you are purchasing in can make a huge difference, because there are something called tax stamps, and in some states, the seller pays all of it. In some states, the buyer and seller can split tax stamps. So that could be thousands of dollars in additional funds that you have to pay. Based on where you live, the taxes are going to be different. So when you set up your escrow accounts, or what they're called, for taxes and insurance, different areas will have different taxes. So certain areas can have a much higher escrow balance you need. Same for insurance. If you're buying a multifamily property, the insurance is going to be higher on it. If you have a home with a pool or a larger home, then your insurance might be higher, and that's going to be a factor in it. So the wide range really is accurate, where it does vary significantly based on where you're buying and what type of home you're buying. So keep that in mind, and just ask in the beginning. Anyone should be giving you not just what your payment's going to be and what you're qualifying for, but a good estimate on your closing costs as well, and the cash that you're going to need to bring. So just ask, and that's generally the best way to go about it. And then, are the first-time home buyer benefits still worth it in the current market with interest rates and prices where they're at? So there are all sorts of different first-time home buyer benefits. Just a general one is, for most programs, you're going to see a slightly lower interest rate for being a first-time home buyer. But then there's also certain programs that you can qualify as first-time home buyer, certain down payment assistance options that you can qualify as first-time home buyer. And the general idea is it worth it? It's kind of going back to the first slide I showed, which is, it generally makes sense to purchase a home. The three main things that I look at when purchasing are, and Bea also touched on this as well, is the home a home that you'd be happy with? Do you have an area that you want to live in? Is there a home that you want to live in? Do you qualify for the home? And are you comfortable with the payment on the home? If you meet those three, if you qualify, the payment's comfortable, and it's a home you'd be happy to live in, really, regardless of where interest rates are at or where home prices are at, it makes sense to purchase it. So yes, I'd say the first-time home buyer benefits, even in this current market, can still be worth it. It depends on your personal situation, but for a lot of people, I'd say it is.
Excuse me. I'm going to answer an anonymous question that somebody threw in the chat. They asked, what is the purpose of an appraisal? It seems to me that the value of the home should be what someone is willing to pay for it. So if a home appraises for $500,000, but there's an offer for $550,000, what impact does that appraisal fee? I may be stepping on Rick's toes a bit here, but the government regulations require that the lender get an appraisal and can only lend a certain percentage of what that appraisal is. So, and as Bea mentioned, what a person is willing to pay and what its appraised value are two very different things. I may be willing to pay $50,000 over its actual price. Why? Because it reminds me of the home I grew up in, because it's got a gorgeous garden that I haven't seen. Think about all kinds of things that we overpay for. So the banks are regulated by the federal government. Why? Because that's where they borrow their money from. So they're stuck within a certain margin that they have to work within. Additionally, this kind of dovetails into another question. Someone asked, are there hidden costs, or what are the hidden costs? There are no hidden costs. Rick has to disclose all the costs of the loan. If by hidden, a person means costs that I didn't look at or didn't consider, those might exist. But in reality, Rick has to disclose all the varying costs. Are there some numbers that change depending on where the property is, what its value is, those kinds of things? Yes. I mean, the tax rate in Wellesley is way different than the tax rate in Waltham versus the tax rate in Webster. I mean, so my escrow values for insurance, taxes, those kinds of things will definitely change. I will tell you, I've represented numerous banks here in the Commonwealth. Their closing costs are all relatively comparable, plus or minus $100, $200 one way or the other. I mean, there really aren't, in today's world, these unknown hidden costs. And there really can't be, because, as I said, the banks are required by federal law to do certain things. The last thing I want to say, and Rick did touch upon this, and you're only looking, or most of you, at rates that were 4% and a little bit lower. If you're ancient like me, when I graduated law school, the interest rates on home loans was 18%. So, 4% was unheard of at that. That didn't exist. And so is 7-8% high? Yes, compared to 4, but not compared to 18. Is owning better than renting? Yes. 1,000,000 times yes. But why? Because every time you pay money in, you're buying something. Now, when I used to have rental property, I would tell you, and this is a lie, no, absolutely, rent from me. It's good. You're paying my mortgage and making me money. It's a wonderful thing. Okay? The other thing about owning a home is all the interest that you are paying in the first, second, third, fourth, 10th, 15th year is deductible. So the bulk of your mortgage payment in the beginning is interest. So if you end up paying $15,000 in payments, you're probably going to be paying an interest of that at least $12,000. That comes off your taxes. That is a wonderful thing that happens, because all of a sudden your gross income is going to go, and you're going to be a happy camper, because now suddenly you're potentially going to get a $3,000 or $4,000 benefit that comes back to you, a refund from the government. So owning a home is something that is a really exciting thing to do. It's a wonderful thing to do. If I can give you one caution, don't buy your McMansion as the first home, okay? It's okay to buy a smaller home that fits your life for right now. You know why? Because you'll be able to sell that home in the future. It will be worth more money in the future, and you'll buy that bigger home. It's okay to wait for that perfect home to show up. My wife and I bought our small home originally, and we're still in it. Is it bigger? Yes, because we've added to that home, okay? And also because I said I'm never going to move, and that you can just shoot me and throw me in the back and move if you want, but I'm not moving ever again. I'm a person that likes staying in one place, but you might be a person that wants to buy one, stay in it for 3-4 years, sell it and get something bigger, which is a great thing. Why? Because when you own that home, it's yours. It's nobody else's. The broken shingle, the paint peeling, The backyard that needs mowing, it's all yours, and it's a wonderful experience. Don't put yourself into something that you can't afford, and I don't think B would let you do that, truthfully. But also understand that it's a scary thing. It just is. When I bought my first home with my wife, I was terrified. I said, holy crap, how am I going to do this? Well, you know what? We did. And so doesn't everyone else. So plan, talk to B, talk to Rick, get good advice, take their advice, and take the plunge. You know why? Because eventually the rates will go down a little bit. You'll refinance in 3-4 years when the rates come down significantly, and then your payment will go down, but you'll be okay. It's a great thing to do. That's all I got to tell you. And again, if you have a question, anything about this, they'll be giving you my cell phone, which I'll tell you now, just so you'll have it, 617-429-8855. Just call me and say, Dave, I heard you. You sounded like a lunatic. Can I ask you some questions? And I'll say, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David. Thank you so much, Rick. And thank you so much, Bea, for taking the time out of your day to share such valuable insights and your expertise on home buying.